Welcome to the Redhead Reveal podcast, where we reveal what it means to truly connect. I'm Jenn Pinkerton, your Redhead host. I'm a psychotherapist, high-performance coach, sexologist, writer, and speaker. As a connection expert, I help people transform by exploring the root causes and beliefs and behaviors that hold them back. Let's talk about living a life where you thrive. All right. Well, today I'm excited to welcome our guest, Lauren Rogers. And Lauren is someone who really exists in the world that I love to be in. And I don't find a lot of other people that are so invested in this work. And I'm so excited for my listeners to meet you, Lauren, and welcome here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I feel so similarly aligned that it is such a joy to find someone who is as passionate about this work and this love of the work that we both share.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Now, you are a certified holistic sexuality educator and embodied intimacy and relationship coach. When I read about you, so many people talk about how warm you are and your connection and the shame-free guidance you give, and within your specialty work, I think that is so important that you align that way and you have this kind of relationship with your clients and with people that follow you and follow your work. And I'm excited for people to hear that and get a glimpse of you today.
Thank you. Thank you. It's truly creating spaces that feel safe in my clients' bodies is one of my greatest joys. And I like to say often that this feels like being the human being that I needed during my own season of discovering these things. So thank you for sharing that.
Makes a lot of sense.
It's very important to me.
So tell me, what created this desire to be in this work? Tell me how you got started.
Oh, it's a story. I'll try to keep it
brief.
Enlighten Such me. A good story. Such a good story. So I grew up in Central Virginia, and for some of your listeners, I'll give a little context. I am at I like to say, the hotbed of purity culture, the birth of purity culture. I live in Lynchburg, Virginia, which is where Liberty University is, and Jerry Falwell Sr., who founded that school, is together with the president in office at the time, the one who kind of gave us all things purity culture that led to people putting pledges on the lawn in Washington, D.C. And so interestingly enough, my parents had not grown up with this idea of sexuality being a shameful thing or a girl's body belonging to her father until her wedding day. And yet they found themselves inside of a world that was a big proponent of things like Joshua Harris's book, I Kissed Dating Goodbye, of old-fashioned courtship models and the like. So I grew up blissfully ignorant and frankly enjoying the life that was given to me inside of evangelical Christianity. And then found a person who ended up becoming my husband at the age of 21. And we were engaged to be married in November. And then my mother got sick with pancreatic cancer. And so we bumped our wedding up 6 months. And on the day, I kid you not, that we were supposed to be having our very first premarital counseling session, which I always do. Ever have those points in your story where you go, I wonder what would have happened if?
Yes, absolutely. It's the fork in the road, the proverbial, where do we go from here?
So that's one of those moments where I wonder if these licensed therapists that we were going to be having our premarital counseling with would have gone, there seems to be a lack of attraction on your husband's end. But we never got there because instead my mother was diagnosed with cancer, asked if we could bump our wedding up so she could see us get married before she died. The one piece of sexual advice I was given was take care of your husband's needs and everything will be fine. I had never received any understanding of my own body's capacity for pleasure. I had never understood anything really at all. I had never seen a diagram of penetrative intercourse, nothing. We got married on May 4th. My mother passed away on May 25th. That clicked something in my then husband's body. He began to struggle deeply with alcoholism. And we entered into a dark marriage that lasted for a decade. Once I got out of this marriage, due to so many things that we don't have time for today, I had a daughter. I was alone. I lost my entire community because the world in which I existed in did not believe in divorce and did not believe women. And so I found myself alone on a basement apartment floor. I had lost my home, everything. And I thought, what now? If my worth was tied to my virginity and I am no longer a virgin, am I a whore? What now guides me, because I did it all the quote unquote right way? Who am I now as a sexual being, as a 35-year-old woman? Do I get to desire? Do I want to experience being desired? Possibly the first time in my life. And so I began to study. And that is what led me to this. So I just began to devour books on feminine sexuality, books on relationships, books on trauma healing, books on so much. And one by one, friends started to ask me, what's going on? You look like a different human being. You are starting to blossom and flourish and heal. And what are you reading? So I started sharing books. And then before too long, I thought, I wonder if there's any schools where I could study more of this. Because at that time, I was working in the maternal health field. And I thought, oh, sexual health is pretty congruent to maternal health. I think I could work this under the umbrella of my nonprofit organization. And so I found a school and went back to school in 2021. And 6 months in, I thought, this is my new calling. Because if I had understood this, if I had been able to understand my needs, wants, and desires, and learn to put those forward as beautiful things, and then learned also that I could negotiate in a third domain with other sexual partners, with other human beings who could decide whether or not they were interested in providing those things for me, oh, that could have changed a lot of things. And even more than that, I think, quite frankly, it could heal the world. And so I opened the doors for this business in 2022, wondering if anyone in the world would feel similarly or would want to study this or would want to attend courses or work one-on-one with me. And yeah, the rest is history. I had a reel that would go ahead.
That's an amazing story, because it's this awakening, this embodiment that you now possess, that you began to see. And I think about, when you're telling me this story, how many people that I have worked with personally, that I know of other people, other peers have worked with, that have a similar story of, we don't know what we don't know, and what is so normalized and what is so accepted. And so many women, I think, don't get to experience that desire, don't get to experience embodiment, don't get to understand what sex can look like and feel like. And that experiential aspect of it, I love this story, because I love to see how much you radiate this sense of joy in telling it. And so, yes, I think you're exactly where you need to be, Lauren.
Thank you. And isn't it interesting about story that we can often feel so isolated. We can often feel that I'm the only one who must not have received some type of sexuality understanding. And that's the thing, right? That depression and anxiety and sadness wants us to feel, but it's so far from true. I assumed I must be the only one who had incomplete and inaccurate understanding of my own body and the bodies of others. But no, my friends, we are all out there, and we all deserve this level of embodied education.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So hitting off with that, one of the topics that I know you speak about that I think is really, really exciting to me, the way you word it, I want to talk about the weeding of the sexual belief garden. So let's just start with that and explain to the listeners what that means.
It's something that revolutionized my life. So when I share this, I want everyone listening to know I use this. This has been an analogy, a modality, whatever you want to call it, that has been so immensely helpful to me. So it goes like this, that we all have a sexual garden, and that was planted starting very young in our bodies, and planted without our consent primarily. And so I believe that each of us have a right and a responsibility to weed our sexual gardens. So this is how I would go about that. I would encourage everyone listening to go back in their bodies, engage your active imagination, and think about yourself as a 7-year-old. Where were you in the world? What do you remember about your parents' relationship or your primary caregivers? What do you remember about school, church, social life, your neighborhood? What did you enjoy? Kind of just embody 7-year-old self. Now, I'm going to ask you a few fill-in-the-blank questions. And I want you to just answer them on your own. Maybe you're driving, you could say them out loud. Maybe you want to pull out a journal and do this at home. Maybe you want to pause this or make a mark and come back. Here's some questions. And I want you to answer in your 7-year-old voice. Don't use the wisdom you have now. Answer as your 7-year-old self. Sex is, fill in the blank. Romance is. Relationships are. My body belongs to. I want. To stay safe, I. It's a man's job to. It's a woman's job too. I hear Jen laughing.
I can't help but giggle as I'm hearing
Right?
you. Oh,
Interesting at 7. Sometimes we get a little squirmy, right? We remember, I was just with a client just momentarily ago, and she has no recollection of any affection between her parents, her primary caregivers. None. Wow. There was no gentle kisses. There was nothing. So relationships are something you do. Was something that she said about that, right? Something that grown-ups do? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So interesting. All right. Now fast forward. I want everyone to put themselves in their 14-year-old body. Such a wild time. I have a 14-year-old right now. Puberty. Right? It is. Puberty central. Okay. So again, embody that. What was going on in your life? What were about your friend groups? Did you have friends who were sexually active? Were you sexually active? Had you started menstruating? Just think through these things. Same questions. Here we go. Sex is, fill in the blank. My body is. My body belongs to. Romance is. Relationships are. Guys want. I want. Pleasure is. To stay safe, I. All right. Reflect on those. Now we're fast forwarding one final time. Age 21. Another pivotal time for our human development and our sexual and development. Think about where you were. Are you graduating from college? Are you in college? Are you working? Are you like me in a marriage? I mean, so many things happen at age 21. Same types of questions. Sex is. Relationships are. Romance is. A woman's job is, a man's job is. I want and need. My pleasure is. My body belongs to. To stay safe, I. Now, again.
I love that last question. To stay safe, I. Okay.
Right. Interesting one. And we can unpack that a little bit later because I'd love to see why it was like juicy in your body. So this is now what I want us to do. So these fill in the blanks are the beliefs that were planted in what I term our sexual gardens at ages 7, 14, and 21. We could expound on it. You could go into other memories that you have in your own life, both positive and negative lived experiences. Now, as you look at these beliefs, I want to give you 3 different categories. I want you to imagine you're looking at a garden and you spot a weed and you pluck that weed out. It comes out full roots, easy peasy, lemon squeezy, you pulled it long ago. That I would label an explicit sex negative or body negative or pleasure negative belief. That's one that you saw long ago, doesn't even affect you. You've weeded it. Okay. That could be one of my clients thought that sex was something that adults do where they use each other's excrement and smush it around when they were about 7 years old. Okay. Because they were trying to think of the grossest thing with their little neighborhood friends. Okay. So that's explicit, doesn't phase us anymore. Then we have the next level of sex negative belief, and that would be a latent belief. And that's like you're weeding a garden and you go to pull that dandelion and the weeds get stuck underneath. That's a belief that you no longer align with, but boy, oh boy, does it frustrate you sometimes. It feels like, I don't want to believe that my body belongs to somebody else. I know it belongs to me, but it gets in the way of my pleasure sometimes. Interesting. I would label that a latent sex negative or pleasure negative belief. Then the deepest level of negative belief would be a body-based belief. Those are going to literally feel somatically connected in your body. So if as you were filling in these blanks, you felt a shiver down your spine, or you felt your throat close up a little bit, or your tummy tightened, or you felt your head turn away, or as you were driving and listening to me give this analogy, you felt your hands grip the steering wheel, because the belief that came up in your body is literally attached deeply in your soul. The Reverend Beverly Dale, who initiated this model, she equates a body-based sex-negative belief to soil blight. Now, I don't say this so that we need to be sad and depressed. I say it for this reason, that a good farmer knows that the way to heal sick soil is to let it rest, is to give it time, to spread some manure around on it, to give it lots of sunlight and rain. And I tell my clients this and had to tell myself this because some sex negative beliefs that are latent, my goodness, with some tilling, with some good podcast listening, with some good books, with working with someone, are easy to get up out of that soil. And those body-based beliefs that were planted in our gardens, usually without our consent by other people, deserve all the time in the world. Deserve gentleness, deserve love and compassion, because they take a longer time to heal. And it has become a very necessary part of my healing that when I feel the residual effects of a body-based sex-negative belief still pop up in my body because of decades of indoctrination, right, I am able to give grace and compassion to myself. So this is how we weed, and then we understand, like, ooh, what can we use to till that soil? And it becomes so fun. So yeah, that's the beginning of my exercise.
Yeah, it's a great structure around that concept and how to wrap around that in a way people, I think, can easily understand that. Because I do think so many of us, we enter into adulthood and our sexuality being very confused. You know, you maybe want what you want, but you're not sure if you're supposed to want that. You feel what you feel, but you're not sure you're supposed to feel that. And what I kind of laughed about when you were, or was excited about when you said, what feels safe, I immediately thought of the fact that I focus so much on emotional safety, that everybody's searching for emotional safety. That's what we all want, is emotional safety. And so, and that extends to how we feel sexually. And so the safety aspect is something that I think so often when I see clients or people that are missing or have this disconnection from their body, it's about that safety that they're subconsciously or consciously searching for and don't know how to find. But yet we can find so much of it in ourselves. So I love this. Love this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so now let's talk about the scripts. Like, what is a sexual script, and how does that get formed? What do we do to create that? So tell us about sexual scripts.
It's one of my favorite things to talk about. So my background is in musical theater. So growing up, I thought all I wanted to do was be on Broadway someday. And what is interesting about that is that when you're working on a play, whether it's a musical or a straight play, you're handed a script. You're handed another person's story to tell. And what's so interesting about the sex that we are having with these beautiful bodies of ours is that usually we are following someone else's script. Now, Sternberg did a ton of research around this and found that there are about 26 different love stories that we're all just following along. And yet what I find is that we have these scripts written by different influences. So I would give this again to your audience as such a fun conversation. Have it with your sexual partner, have it with some girlfriends, have this conversation of what scripts are you still following? Were they written by movies? I cannot tell you how many people talk about the movie Titanic when they explain how their sexual scripts were written, what pursuit is supposed to look like, who's supposed to initiate sex, when sex happens, at what time of day, who is allowed to have sex, who gets to desire. Do, for instance, mothers get to have great sex, or is that only for the early 20-somethings? Right? Who is entitled to pleasure? Who is able to create the sexual experience? Who's able to say, hey, I want to try something new? Who's able to get bored? Who is able to say, I don't feel safe? Right? Where do these conversations happen, if any? Right? So much of the sex that we learned how to have was given to us through media scripts. All right. And in so much of media, whether we are talking erotic media or we are talking movies, we don't see people stumbling about trying to get their pants off. We don't see people having a dry mouth or somebody needing to get the lubrication. We see this seamless event that just happens, which is what so many
it's entertainment.
Right? It's entertainment, my friends.
Right.
And so these scripts that most of us are following are coming from some form of entertainment. And we should, I deeply believe, not feel ashamed about that. There is a finger to wag. There is. And that is at our society and culture that still say, shh, it's not polite to talk about sex and bodies. No, shh, that's a private thing. And the people being harmed by this silly ideology is the people who desire to have connected and emotionally safe sex with their loving partners.
Yes.
And I would argue that we should be having conversations like these on podcasts like yours. We should also be having these conversations on girls' nights out with our friends and around our kitchen tables and in boardrooms and in legislative chambers, because when they are not being had, the people in power will always remain in power and they will always be getting the sex that they want, the ones who are taking and pillaging anyway. And yet, when we start to have these joyful conversations where we go, oh, no, that's not how I have sex, right? We have sex at 10 a.m. on Saturdays, and we love early morning sex. No, after the kids go to bed, are you kidding me? No, I'm exhausted, and I go right to sleep. But this is how we create spaces to play. What we start doing then subconsciously is helping to rewrite our sexual scripts. So yes, there is so much else that we can do working one-on-one with someone to kind of go to the whiteboard and erase it all. But I think it can start organically by just having natural, beautiful conversations with our own actual partners and our own living, breathing friends, not these people who live on a screen and are depicting a form of entertainment to us.
Exactly. I often say that if you cannot talk about sex, you probably shouldn't be having it.
Amen.
I mean, you're not in a place to get to experience it in the way we could be experiencing it. So we have to talk about it. And I think that this is so important because, again, I love the metaphors and everything you're using because it allows people to really tangibly take hold of it. And I think that scripts are so common, but I wonder how often people, if they are maybe more on the repressed sexual side of this axis, how often do they recognize they're even operating from a script?
So seldomly. So
what are some signs? What would be a sign for someone for they can take inventory to say, okay, I've heard this podcast and I wonder if I'm doing that. What would be something that they would look for?
Here's some fill in the blanks. You know, I love these.
Right. I like these.
Sex is supposed to fill in the blank. Sex always starts with fill in the blank. Sex is initiated by fill in the blank. Sex is fill in the blank. Let's pause right here on this one. This is a challenge I give many of my clients to define as an adult. Like you said, we shouldn't be having sex if we can't talk about it.
That's right.
What is sex? And let me explode our typical definition. This is how I have come to define sex now in my body. Sex is the language of my body oriented towards pleasure. Let me say it again. Sex is the language of my body oriented towards pleasure. Sex is not, to me, a penis and a vagina. Sex is not, to me, the pursuit of orgasm. Sex is not, to me, somebody finishing. Sex, to me, is not an item on a checklist.
Right.
Sex is the language of my body oriented towards pleasure. If, gentle audience, you filled in the blank with sex is a penis and a vagina. Sex is my husband's orgasm. Sex is, something that I have to do in order to get what I want. You're finding a script. You are finding a script that was written by someone else. Yes, you're missing out on so much. So much. Why do you say that? Why do you say you're missing out? Yeah. What?
Because it's you are missing. If things are transactional or performative or expectations or roles and responsibilities, you're not embodied. If you cannot feel and experience and have a joyful experience of saying, I love my body, I love how this feels, I love desire, I love arousal, and you're loving the moment, you are missing out. And there's so much more. And I think sex is about more. It's about more feeling, more touch, more connection, more safety. It can do all those things. But I do believe, and I know this by my line of work and your line of work, that is not a common theme. And I would love for it to be. So I love these fill in the blanks. And I hope that everybody listening is going to really pause, write it down, slow down, and think about it. I'm going to put some of that in the show notes too, because I think it's so important for people to be able to really get an idea of, does this apply to me or not? Where do I fall on this?
And I think these are such great conversation starters with our partners and with our friends.
Yes.
Because it can be really neat to see too how often we project onto another what we think they think sex is supposed to be.
Yes.
What's interesting in my line of work is I get to work with a lot of beautiful couples, people who love each other. And so what's so interesting is that they love each other, except their sex is horrible. And they're coming to me saying, please help. I actually like this person. And so what's so interesting when we start to have these juicy conversations about what is sex, who's supposed to initiate sex, what is the outcome or the quote unquote goal, which I hate that term, of sex, what we find often is that one of us believes the other thinks and feels a certain way, and we are shocked to find out that in fact they do not. And what we find there, my friends, is a script. We believe, because of some sitcom that we watched growing up, that men only want one thing. And what is so beautiful is to restore agency and autonomy to these beautiful partners that we have chosen, for them to say, wait, no, I don't feel that way. They're like, wait, what? No.
It's like reclaiming authorship of your own story.
Yes.
This
and
is the
letting
story
your
I
partner
want
do
to
the
have.
same. Yes. And saying, okay, well, great. If neither of us believe this, what do we want to mutually align ourselves to do? Which is then when I bring in values work for my clients and we start to make a sexual values mission statement. And they're like, what? And I'm like, why can an organization have a mission statement, but yet your sex can't? They start to laugh. Yes. And I'm like, why is it that within the workplace, we understand that many of us working side by side is more beneficial when we are working towards the same goal or with the same values? Because we are seeking.
But that goal is what's missing often, because there's not an alignment. It's because one person is doing their thing and somebody else is doing their thing, and nobody is thinking about, what is our thing? What do we want together? What can I do for you and what can you do for me? And I think there's so much wrapped up in that. So many of our primary love lessons interfere with that. And, as you say, scripts, and as weeding the garden, as you're talking about, it's these ideas, the love lessons that we're bringing forth to our relationship that we don't even understand are harmful. I do believe that most people don't understand how harmful that is. It's just normalized. It's just this is just average. It's just what we do, and don't understand that there's more. As I always say, there's so much more to sex.
So much more. And you mentioned this earlier, but that safety seeking strategy that so many of us used to really truly stay safe in younger ages, I deeply believe should not be shamed. And I deeply believe that at some point in our lives, we realize that we're still utilizing the same safety-seeking behaviors. These adaptive behaviors that we chose to use to stay safe when we were younger are no longer having a great impact. And so I often say that is a juicy opportunity to say, oh yeah, there is more out there. And what's so cool about sex and romance and relationship is that when we were wounded inside of relationship, we get the opportunity, if we so choose, to heal inside of relationship as well. And the world is your oyster. There is so much more when we throw away these outdated, antiquated scripts that are not beneficial to anyone. And
I think oftentimes people get rooted in them out of a what I almost call a backward safety, out of the sense
Yes.
of, wait a minute, if I don't do this, then who am I? If I don't subscribe to this idea that it's only okay for a woman to do X, or if I don't subscribe to this idea that as a man I can only do this, it's almost a threat. That safety is on the reverse side of it, to say, what is my own identity? And so I think there's so much identity building and identity exploration that can happen. And what kind of sexual partner do I want to be?
Yes. I was working with a client early this morning, and we were talking about this very thing, the risk involved with choosing a new pathway.
Yes.
With saying, I have been identified with the non-sexual partner. Mm-hmm. But what happens if I begin to understand, begin to claim that I am a woman with wants?
Yes.
It can often be a little scary to say, wait, there are things that I want. And yet, I love this quote. I was always afraid to take, so I gave. It was not a virtue. It was a disguise.
But that's beautiful.
Yes. And when we can begin to understand that by being human beings with wants, we actually stand more in our integrity when we can present those wants, and then also understand that others get to decide whether or not they want to be the one providing us with this thing.
Right.
The whole world starts to fall into place. Chink, chink, chink. But yes,
so now everyone's authentic, and then everyone has autonomy. Yes. Everyone is allowed to have their own boundaries, and everyone feels true to who they are. Talk about a massive shift in the entire, concept. Yes. I love it. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. I worked with a client not too long ago where the wife was starting to explore her sexuality in a beautiful way. Her children were gone. Her home was just she and her husband. And she felt as though, wow, I want to change things. I'm finally looking at life differently. She felt really good about herself. She had a great sense of her own self image, and was really embracing this time of her life. And her husband, because of his own scripts, of his own garden, of his own thoughts, felt so threatened by that. It was almost like, oh, is she having an affair? Where is this coming from? And the work to be able to normalize that, the work to say, this is an amazing thing. This is a gift. It's not a threat. And to rewire that, and then it becomes something so amazing. And now they're thinking that this time in their life is the best they've ever had in their marriage. And I think so many more people could do that if they could adopt a sense of curiosity. Curiosity about your partner, curiosity about yourself.
Curiosity is one of my favorite words on earth.
Me too.
I truly believe it is the key to intimacy. We fall into this dangerous trap sometimes, especially in long-term partnership, where we assume we know everything about the other, where we assume that who they are now and who they were then is the same and will be forever the same. And yes, what's so interesting, especially when we study female sexuality, is that we've been lied to, that women are highly sexual beings. And it's not that they don't want sex, it's that they don't want that sex. Mm-hmm. And when they are given freedom and permission inside of containers like sessions with you to start to explore these things, well, then, yes, we start to understand, oh, my goodness, this is what my body is capable of. This is what I want. This is what I could be nurturing. And yes, when beautiful, loving partners can come alongside that and say, oh, my goodness, teach me, show me, help me also grow. Mm-hmm. Yes, there was a recent study that came out that said that the best sex of our lives is happening around the age of 55, which is interesting to me because that means that folks on the other side, the upper side of 55, are still having great sex just as much as the lower side, because to pull that average up to 55 means that there is great sex to be had, my friend. So this rumor that, sex is only for the young, that's silliness.
No, so and I think it takes some maturity to be brave enough and courageous enough to say, I want to figure out who I am and who I want to be on all fronts of life, including my sexuality, including, how am I in touch with being a sensual being in itself. Because sensuality and sexuality to me is so much more than just that. And people put it in this little box versus how do you feel about yourself when it's just you? How do you feel about when you're describing yourself, when you think about who you are? And so I think there's a lot of identity building and there's a lot of other work that aligns, and it can really change your entire viewpoint of how you see yourself. So
I couldn't agree more. I mean, my cheeks are just hurting because, yes, I truly believe that when we can understand who we are, I love that the definition of sensuality as I teach it is the awareness of and an appreciation for one's own body and the bodies of others. And what's so interesting about that is when we can be embodied in this self right here. Well, then it's interesting because when I am more present, I am able to share space with you even more so, which then, interesting how children who are watching adults exist in that way are then benefited. And then interesting how our friends are benefited when they are witnessing these relational things. Oh, interesting. And then communities start to do a little better because the children and the friends of this couple or us in this relationship container are existing in health and communication. Well, then communities start to heal, and then whole towns start to heal, and whole cities and
it's
states.
the ripple effect.
It is. And I just think, isn't that beautiful? That, we have so confined sensuality and sexuality to what we do behind closed doors on a certain day of the week with a penis and a vagina. And my friends, it's so much more. It is. And it truly allows us to love ourselves and others much more deeply.
And on that note about the loving yourself, it gets me to the point of the last section I want to talk about is that you're not broken. Loving yourself enough to know you are not broken, that we can challenge the idea that something is wrong with me. So I want you to touch on that part because I know that's a big part of your work. So explain that to the listeners, please.
It's a huge part of my work. And it's one of those pieces wherein earlier I had said that I had felt that it was just me for so long until I went back to school and found out, no, everyone feels that they have received some incomplete and inaccurate understanding of their own bodies and the bodies of others. And then client after client was appearing on my Zoom screen or in my cozy office in tears saying, Lauren, I feel like I'm broken. And a trauma-informed approach would say, oh, no. It's not what's wrong with you. It's what happened. And so what I encourage my clients and myself to challenge this thought with is, what if I'm not broken? What if the structures and the scripts and the farmers and the gardeners and the old societal things, what if those are broken? What if the very nature of the teachings that we were given, the scripts we were handed, the messaging, what if that is all very broken? And what if you are an inherently perfect sexual being that the world just piled a bunch of crap on top of? And what if this work, this season of your life, is simply an archaeological dig? What if we can gently and tenderly kind of push things off and dust with those little archaeological dusters down to finding the truest sense of who you are? And what if the way that those folks on screen have sexual encounters, and what if the way those folks exist in their relationship are not how you're supposed to? What if the one who knows how you are supposed to be as a sexual creature is you? And what if your needs, wants, and desires are as unique as your flavor palette, as the foods you like to eat, as the colors you like to wear, as how you like to decorate a house, as the car you drive, as the way you laugh? And what if the uniqueness of you is part of the beauty that you bring to this world and to your sexual relationships? And so what if this idea that we're all supposed to be the same is the silly thing? And what if you are inherently perfect?
I love that. I often say, let's return to the person we're born to be.
Yes.
Before, we were limited and held back and affected by trauma, experiences, challenges, society, systemic issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this aligns with that so beautifully.
Yes.
It has been so amazing to have you on here, Lauren. And I think you are such a wealth of knowledge. And I can't wait for everybody to get to dive into this episode. As we close, I want to ask you to leave a guest question. This is a new season that we're in now for my podcast, Redhead Reveal. And I ask each time I have a guest to leave a question for a future guest. And it doesn't relate to anything. It's just whatever you want to ask. And it creates this beautiful continuity with my guests. And I love it. So hit me with what you want me to hit the next guest with.
This was inspired by our earlier kind of musing on curiosity.
Yes.
So I would love a future guest to answer. What titillates you? What tickles your fancy uniquely, erotically, pleasurably, that feels uniquely aligned to you? Maybe it's silly, maybe it's fantastical, maybe it's what is uniquely titillating to you?
I think that's great. All right, Lauren, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate having you. And we will have this episode out soon, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Thank you
Be in
so
touch,
much
okay?
for having me. Okay, thank
All right,
you.
Thank you, Lauren. All right, bye-bye.